Your swollen knees might not be about age at all. Sometimes what you had for breakfast yesterday is still inflaming your joints today. You've probably heard that joint pain and swelling are just part of getting older, something you have to accept and live with. But here's what most people don't realize. You might be unknowingly eating foods that are actively making your swelling worse, multiple times a week. And the strange part? These aren't even foods you'd think are bad for you. Think about your last week. You woke up one morning and your knees felt a little puffy. Maybe your fingers were stiffer than usual. You rubbed them, took some medication, and went about your day. By evening, you felt a little better. A few days later, it happens again. You don't connect the dots because the swelling comes and goes. It's not like you ate something obviously unhealthy. It was probably just a regular breakfast or lunch. That's exactly why this pattern is so easy to miss. I am Dr. Livia Carter. I've spent the last 20 years helping people just like you understand what's really happening inside their bodies. I'm not here to scare you or tell you to give up foods you love. I'm here to help you make informed choices. Please take a moment and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, how old are you, and what health problem you're facing today? I read your comments. Knowing your story helps me create videos that actually matter to you. Today, I'm going to walk you through 4 foods that many of my patients don't realize are connected to their joint swelling. I'll explain why each one affects your joints, what happens in your body when you eat them, and what you can do about it. No complicated science, just real, practical information you can use today. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which foods might be working against you. You'll understand why your body is reacting the way it is, and you'll have simple, doable alternatives that taste good and won't make you feel like you're sacrificing. Most importantly, you'll feel empowered knowing that some of your swelling might actually be something you can influence. Let me start with something you probably use almost every day, without thinking about it: vegetable oils. Now, I'm not talking about all oils. I'm talking specifically about the oils you find in most kitchens. Soybean oil, corn oil, safflower oil, canola oil. These are everywhere. They're in your cooking spray, your salad dressings, your baked goods from the store, even in foods you wouldn't expect. Here's what happens in your body when you eat these oils regularly. Your body needs a balance between something called omega-6 and omega-3 fats. Think of it like a scale. When the scale tips too far in one direction, your immune system gets confused. It starts sending out signals that create inflammation. And guess where that inflammation shows up first? In your joints. Vegetable oils are extremely high in omega-6. If you're using them every day, cooking with them, eating foods fried in them, having salad dressing made with them, you're tipping that scale further and further. Your body responds by producing more inflammatory chemicals. These chemicals accumulate in your joints, and that's where you feel the swelling, the stiffness, the discomfort that gets worse as the day goes on. Here's the good news. This one is completely reversible. You don't have to eliminate these oils overnight. Many of my patients see improvement in their joint swelling within 2 to 3 weeks of simply switching to a different oil for cooking. It's not about deprivation, it's about swapping one habit for a better one. The oils you want to use instead are olive oil for salad dressings and low-heat cooking, and coconut oil or avocado oil for higher heat cooking. These oils have a different fat composition. They don't create the same inflammatory cascade in your body. Your joints won't suddenly feel perfect, but you'll notice the swelling starts to come down. Your morning stiffness might ease up, and you'll have more days where you can move without that heavy feeling in your hands and knees. I had a patient named Margaret who was making her own salad dressing with store-bought vegetable oil every single day. She loved salads. It was her healthy habit. But her knuckles were swollen, and she was starting to worry she might develop arthritis like her mother did. We switched her dressing to olive oil. Within a month, she messaged me saying her rings fit better. She wasn't doing anything else differently. Just that one swap made a real difference. Now, you might be wondering, what if I eat foods that are already made with these oils? That's a real question. The truth is, you can't avoid them completely. They're in too many foods. But you can control what happens in your own kitchen. When you cook your own meals, you're in charge of the oil. And since most of us eat at home more often than we eat out, that's where the biggest impact happens. Let me ask you, what oil are you using right now when you cook? If you're not sure, go check your kitchen. Just notice what you have. No judgment. We'll come back to that. One more thing about vegetable oils that catches people by surprise. They're in things that don't taste oily at all. Bread from the bakery, packaged snacks, dressings, even some healthy granola. When you're eating these regularly, you're getting this inflammatory oil again and again throughout the day. It adds up. The beautiful part is that you don't need willpower to change this. You just need awareness and a simple swap. And unlike some health changes that feel restrictive, this one actually makes food taste better to most people. Olive oil has a real flavor. It makes vegetables taste more like themselves. That's not a sacrifice. That's an upgrade. Now let's talk about something that's probably in your home right now, and it's almost certainly a bigger factor in your joint swelling than you realize. Added sugars. I'm not talking about the natural sugar in an apple. I'm talking about the white sugar in your coffee, the brown sugar in your oatmeal, the high fructose corn syrup in many packaged foods, and all the natural sweeteners hiding in foods that claim to be healthy. When you eat something sweet, your blood sugar spikes. Your body releases insulin to bring it back down. But here's what most people don't know. That spike and crash cycle creates inflammation in your entire body. It's like your body is a busy kitchen, and suddenly someone turns up all the burners at once. Everything gets hot and stressed. That stress response includes the release of inflammatory chemicals. These chemicals don't just stay in your bloodstream, they travel throughout your body. And they have a particular affinity for your joints. So someone who has toast with jam for breakfast, a soda in the afternoon, and cookies after dinner is essentially sending inflammatory signals to their joints 3 times a day. The reason I'm telling you this first is because this change makes an enormous difference, and usually very quickly. Many of my patients tell me they feel less puffy within days of reducing added sugars. Their rings come off easier, their ankles look less swollen, and here's what surprises them. They have more stable energy throughout the day. When you're eating a lot of added sugar, your body is on a roller coaster. You eat something sweet, feel energized for a little while, then crash. That crash is where the joint pain often feels worse, because when your energy crashes, you're fatigued. And when you're fatigued, the swelling feels more pronounced. It's not just physical, it's also how you're experiencing it. When you remove the added sugars, you come off that roller coaster. Your energy is steadier. Your body doesn't need to trigger that inflammatory response. Your joints can start to calm down. I have another patient, Robert, who was a coffee drinker, 2 cups every morning, each with 2 teaspoons of sugar. Plus, he always had something sweet with his mid-morning coffee. He didn't think of himself as having a sweet tooth. He just liked his routine. His wrists and hands were often swollen, especially by afternoon. When we talked about his diet, he resisted changing his coffee, but I asked him, "What if you just changed how you sweet it?" He switched to a small amount of honey first, just to soften the transition. Then he realized he could reduce it further because he was drinking better quality coffee that didn't taste bitter. Within 2 weeks, he noticed his hands looked different. Less puffy. He could make a fist more comfortably. The other thing about sugar is that it's addictive. I don't mean that philosophically, I mean that literally. It triggers the same reward centers in your brain as other addictive substances. So when you try to cut it, you might feel like you're craving it because your brain is actually craving it. This is normal. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're fighting against real chemistry. Think about your own day for a moment. Where is the added sugar coming up? Your coffee? Your breakfast cereal? Your afternoon snack? Your after-dinner habit? Just notice. You don't have to change anything yet. Awareness comes first. Here's what I tell people. You don't have to go from your current sugar intake to 0 overnight. That's why most people fail. Instead, what if you just reduced by half? If you normally have 1 soda, have half a soda. If you usually put 2 teaspoons of sugar in your coffee, use 1.
If you always have dessert after dinner, have it 4 times a week instead of 7. This gradual approach works because your body adjusts, your cravings decrease, and it doesn't feel like deprivation. And here's something beautiful that happens. As the swelling starts to go down, you become more motivated. You start to feel the difference. Your clothes fit better, your joints hurt less. That positive feedback is powerful. You're not just giving something up, you're gaining something. Mobility, comfort, a life where your body doesn't slow you down as much.
This one surprises people because they've been told for years that carbohydrates are healthy. And some carbohydrates absolutely are, but there's a specific type that's quietly creating inflammation in your joints, and it's probably something you eat multiple times a day: refined grains. Refined grains are things like white bread, pasta, white rice, many cereals, and flour-based baked goods. Here's what happens to these foods before they get to your table. They start as whole grains, which have fiber and nutrients, but then they're processed. The fiber is removed, the nutrients are stripped away, and what's left is basically refined starch. This starch hits your bloodstream like a sugar spike, even though it doesn't taste sweet. Your body doesn't distinguish between the sugar in a candy bar and the starch in a piece of white bread. To your body, they're both simple carbohydrates that spike your blood sugar quickly.
And remember what we talked about with sugar, that spike creates inflammation. The same thing happens here, sometimes even more intensely, because people eat larger portions of bread and grains than they do candy. Now, this doesn't mean you can never have bread or pasta again. I'm not going to tell you that, and I don't believe that. But what I've seen happen in countless patients is that switching to whole grain versions of these foods reduces joint swelling significantly. Not because whole grain bread is magical, but because the fiber in it slows down how quickly the carbohydrates enter your bloodstream. Less spike means less inflammatory response. Let me explain what whole grains actually do in your body. They have fiber. That fiber slows down digestion. Your blood sugar rises gradually instead of sharply. Your body doesn't perceive an emergency. It doesn't trigger the inflammatory response. Your joints don't get that inflammatory signal. Over weeks, that difference compounds. Some of my patients worry that whole grain bread tastes different. You know what? It does. It tastes like actual grain. After a week or two of eating it, regular white bread starts to taste oddly sweet and hollow by comparison. Your taste buds adjust. I have a patient named Helen who was eating white toast every single morning. That was her breakfast. She liked it because it was quick and familiar. Her knees were getting progressively more swollen, and she was starting to think she'd need to be less active. When we talked about her diet, I mentioned that if she switched to whole grain toast, we might see some improvement. She was skeptical, but she tried it. Not because she wanted to be healthier in some abstract way, but because she wanted her knees to feel better. Within 3 weeks, she was back at her water aerobics class twice a week. She felt steady on her feet again. She still eats toast every morning. It's just whole grain now.
Here's another important thing about refined grains. They're designed to be convenient and delicious. The food industry has perfected them to be calorie-dense and easy to eat. So people often eat more of them than they realize. A person might have toast for breakfast, a sandwich for lunch, pasta for dinner, and crackers as a snack. That's 4 servings of refined grain in a day. That's 4 inflammatory signals. If you switch half of those to whole grain versions, you've cut the inflammatory load in half. What refined grains are you eating regularly? Toast? Cereal? Bread? Pasta? Rice? Just notice what your typical day looks like. You must be surprised. The tricky part about refined grains is that they're everywhere, and they're marketed as healthy. Enriched bread sounds healthy. It means they added nutrients back after processing. But they can't add back the fiber, and fiber is crucial.
Multigrain sounds healthy, but if all those grains are refined, you're not getting the benefit. Real whole grain products have whole wheat or whole grain as the first ingredient. The good news is that this swap is probably the easiest of all the changes. You're not giving anything up. You're not hungry. You're not doing complicated meal prep. You're just swapping your bread for a different bread, swapping your rice for a different rice, your pasta for a different pasta. And within a month, most people are thrilled they did because they can feel the difference in their joints.
This last one is particularly tricky because processed meats are promoted as convenient, and they've been in most people's diets for decades. I'm talking about things like deli meats, hot dogs, bacon, sausages, and many canned meats. These foods are convenient, they taste good, and they fit into a busy schedule. But they're one of the biggest culprits in joint swelling that I see in my older patients. The main reason is sodium, salt. Processed meats are loaded with it. A single serving of deli meat can have as much sodium as you should eat in an entire day. Now, your body needs some salt. But when you eat too much, something specific happens. You retain water. Your cells hold on to fluid. This happens throughout your body, but your joints are particularly affected because they're enclosed spaces. Fluid accumulates there, and you get swelling. But here's something that's even more important. Excess salt also increases inflammation directly.
It affects your immune system in a way that promotes inflammatory responses. So it's a double hit. You get fluid retention and inflammation. The beautiful thing about this particular change is that it's often the one that makes the most dramatic, fastest difference. I've had patients reduce their processed meat intake and see noticeable improvement in their joint swelling within days, not weeks, days, because the body responds very quickly to reduced sodium. Let me paint a realistic picture of how this looks in people's lives. Someone has bacon with eggs for breakfast, a sandwich with deli meat for lunch, canned soup for snack, sausage with dinner. That's processed meat 4 times in one day. When you add up all the sodium from those sources, they're pushing 3 or 4 times what their body needs. When they reduce that, maybe having bacon only on weekends, making their sandwich with roasted chicken breasts they cooked themselves, having fresh soup instead of canned, choosing whole meat sausages or just plain meat, their sodium intake comes down dramatically, and their swelling comes down with it.
I worked with a gentleman named Frank who lived alone and relied heavily on processed foods because he found them easy. He'd have deli meat and cheese for lunch almost every day, hot dogs or sausage for dinner several nights a week. His ankles were so swollen that he was having trouble finding shoes that fit. He was starting to wonder if his mobility was permanently limited. We talked about how he could simplify his meals while actually reducing his sodium. Instead of deli meat sandwiches, he could roast a chicken on Sunday and have chicken sandwiches all week. Instead of processed sausages, he could buy ground meat and make his own patties. He was skeptical because it sounded like more work. But when I broke it down, roasting a chicken takes 30 minutes and you get 5 days of lunch. He realized it wasn't actually harder. Within 10 days, his ankles looked noticeably less swollen. His shoes fit again. He felt lighter on his feet.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. I can't give up all processed meats. I like them. They're easy. I'm not asking you to give them up completely. I'm asking you to reduce. Have deli meat twice a week instead of 5 times. Have bacon on Sunday breakfast instead of 3 times a week. These small changes compound. And here's the thing. There are good alternatives that are just as easy. You can buy rotisserie chicken. It's already cooked. You can buy plain ground meat and cook it once for several meals. You can have eggs instead of bacon for breakfast. These aren't harder or less tasty. They're just different. How many times a week are you eating processed meats right now? Deli meat, bacon, sausage, hot dogs? If you're honest with yourself, is there room to reduce that number? Maybe not to 0, but to a smaller number? The other thing about processed meats is that they often replace foods that would be better for you. If you're eating a deli meat sandwich, you could be eating a whole grain bread with roasted vegetables and real meat. If you're having processed sausage for breakfast, you could have eggs or Greek yogurt. The swap usually ends up being not just better for your joints, but genuinely more nourishing. And here's what really gets me excited about this change. When your swelling goes down because your sodium intake went down, you feel the difference almost immediately. Suddenly, your hands feel less puffy. Your wedding ring fits again. Your shoes don't feel tight. This isn't a subtle change. This is something you notice and feel, and that positive feedback motivates you to keep going. You're not just eating differently because someone told you to. You're eating differently because you can actually feel yourself getting better.
I want to know something from you. Of these 4 foods, vegetable oils, added sugars, refined grains, and processed meats, which one do you think is affecting you most right now? The one that, if you changed it, you think you might notice the most difference. Share that in the comments. Tell me which one you're going to start with, or which one is the biggest part of your current routine. I read the comments, and honestly, your answers help me understand what videos you need next. Before I finish, I want to say this clearly. This information is educational. I'm sharing what I've seen in my practice, what the research shows us about how food affects inflammation. But I'm not your personal doctor. You have a specific body, a specific history, and specific medications that might interact with dietary changes. Before you make any significant changes to your diet, especially if you're taking medications, talk to your doctor.
This is especially true if you're on blood thinners or if you have kidney issues that affect how you process sodium. Your doctor knows your full picture. I'm here to empower you with knowledge. Your doctor is there to guide you personally. They work together. In my next video, I'm going to show you what to actually eat instead of these 4 foods. Not just what to avoid, but what to replace them with. Real meals, real recipes, things that taste good and work with a senior schedule. Because avoiding foods that hurt you is just the first step. The second step is discovering foods that actually help you heal. And that's what we're going to talk about next.
Your swollen joints don't have to be your new normal. You've learned today that some of what you've been experiencing might actually be directly connected to things in your kitchen. That's not a scary thing. That's actually wonderful news, because it means you have power. You're not waiting for a miracle cure or accepting that this is just aging. You're making choices, one meal at a time, that help your body feel better. Start small. Pick one of these 4 foods. Notice how much of it you're eating right now. Make one change. Then wait a week or 2 and notice how you feel. This isn't a race. This isn't a diet. This is you, taking gentle control of something that's been bothering you. And I promise you, once you start noticing the improvement, you'll be motivated to keep going. Take care of those joints. They carry you through every moment of your life. You deserve to feel strong and mobile. I'll see you in the next video.